The Champions League, that's it. That's the headline. But we'll also dive into the Europa League with the semifinals now set after Sevilla did their business yesterday. Manchester United also through, while Inter are the other favorites, along with perhaps Shakhtar being the dark horse. Plus, Real Madrid say no new signings, but they do have a few players they can bring back. Valencia are falling apart, and Villarreal are picking up the pieces to build a top four contender. I'm Andres Cordero. Phil Schoen joins me next on Sports Burst. Hello, welcome into a fresh new Sports Burst. I'm Andres Cordero. Joining me on the show today is the best voice in all of broadcast, Phil Schoen. Phil, good to talk to you this morning. The Champions League is back, and really it's arguably the most intriguing matchup to get us underway. As always, we welcome in your comments via the Facebook chat. We'll try and address your questions, your comments, your favorite recipes as the show goes on. But Phil, we begin with this Champions League contest, Atalanta against Paris Saint-Germain. Do you get the same sense that I do, that most people seem to be rooting for Atalanta in this contest?
You're probably right. And you know what? I would have thought that they would have had a decent chance to win this until a couple of things happened. And that was watching PSG gut out, grit out, grind out two cup victories that were not as easy even as some might have expected. And obviously we've seen how good Olympique Lyon is in later play. Now, at the same point, you're also taking a look at a team that, even if he's not 100% fit, the possible threat and also the emotional lift of the return of Kylian Mbappe might give PSG just enough of a push against an Atalanta squad that has been wobbling at the very end, but has still proven to be dangerous this year. So I would agree with you. I mean, it's not exactly like a David versus Goliath, right, but you do end up seeing a lot of people rooting for the little kid with the slingshot.
Yeah, people love the underdog, and Atalanta is as good of an underdog story as there is in world football at the moment. And it's not a flash in the pan sort of thing. It's not just this season. They were actually phenomenal last year as well. This is just their first Champions League campaign, and they'll be back in the tournament next season. So in a sense, it feels like the Bergamo side are playing with house money. I like that you brought up the two cup finals, because you were on the call on play-by-play for both of the Coupe de la Ligue final and the Coupe de France final, which are the only official matches that Paris have played since all the way back in March, when all of football stood still for 3 months and change. Atalanta pose a bigger challenge than either Lyon or Saint-Etienne, don't they? The two teams that Paris beat in those two cup finals, and as you mentioned rightfully, only just beat because one of those went to penalties and the other was decided by a single goal.
I agree, and I think the real danger for PSG is the fact that they're finally going to be taking on a team that can score. You look at Saint-Etienne, it was a very physical game, maybe a little too physical, according to Loic Perrin in his final game for Santé. On the other side, you look at a very well-organized Olympique Lyon, with something Juventus found was impossible to break through enough. But we're taking a look here at an Atalanta squad with Papu Gomez pulling strings that can, at times, score goals for fun. And they're not that bad defensively either. So this is maybe not the best team that is left in the running, but it is one of the teams that could give PSG its most difficult battle.
Yeah, the absence of Josip Ilicic on compassionate leave is a really big deal for Atalanta, because he is, I think, almost as much, if not more, than Papu Gomez instrumental to that team. I think Papu Gomez is almost like the spirit animal, the motivating factor, and he can't put the team on his shoulders, but Ilicic was such a difference maker that his absence is a really big deal. But it's an absence on the other side, on the Parisian side, that has been getting most of the attention. We do know Mbappe is fit enough to feature today. Thomas Tuchel has confirmed as much, that he did see he would play unless there was an injury in training yesterday. That doesn't seem to have been the case. And so Kylian Mbappe is available. We don't know if he can start. But even if he can't, I think the prospect of Mbappe coming off the bench with his energy, with his sort of explosiveness against some relatively tired legs of Atalanta in game could be absolutely deadly. If Mbappe doesn't start, do you still consider Paris the favorites here?
I would say PSG is the favorite regardless, and I almost wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you get to this stage, and especially in a one-game situation where so much of it is mental. You have to have the self-belief, and you have to put fear in the opposition. And Kylian Mbappe puts fear in the opposition more than probably anyone on the planet right now, maybe even more than Lionel Messi, because he has the ability to just beat you with all the physical tools and the skill. So it might even be just one of those situations Atalanta has to prepare for the possibility, which means that maybe they're not preparing for something else, and maybe there's a cheap set play, or maybe Di Maria finds an opening. So even to the point of he's on the bench, he even gets up to stretch, I'm not exactly sure I'm going to believe he's going to step onto the field and play until he actually does. And it's still going to be in the back of the mind for Atalanta. If he does step onto the field and he is capable of playing, this is a guy that can change a game single-handedly, and that could be a problem.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask you about Angel Di Maria because he is suspended for this match, and so often he's the unsung hero for, and certainly was that in the cup matches as well, for Paris Saint-Germain. So the return of Mbappe is good news for Paris, but the absence of Angel Di Maria is not. How much could they miss Di Maria if he's not there, or could Sarabia step in and do the same job?
Sarabia got off to a very good start with PSG, but is kind of, I don't want to say mediocre, but middling. He has the occasional moment of brilliance and then just seems to disappear for 20, 30 minutes at a time. The fact also that Verratti, again, with what's going on with the virus and the tests and everything, was a big question. And the fact that Cavani's not available anymore makes what had been a strong point, arguably one of the strongest offenses on the planet, now show a little bit of vulnerability. But even with that vulnerability, you have Mauro Icardi, who, when he's on, scores goals for fun, and Neymar, who just makes everything fun. So even without Di Maria, there's enough weapons there, but you do raise a good point in the fact that this is not a PSG at full strength.
I want to get to some of these comments in a moment, but before I do that, you mentioned Mauro Icardi. I think in a lot of ways, Icardi, even though we're talking about it in the absence of Edinson Cavani, who was moved on, the all-time top scorer in PSG's history, I think in some ways, the way this team is presently constructed, Icardi seems like a better fit, right? Because he's not drifting out wide to collect the ball in areas that Mbappe and Neymar want. He's not dropping deeper to get involved in the possession in areas that, again, some of these midfielders want. Instead, he is in the box where he can sort of clean up after either rebounds on shots from Mbappe or Neymar, or be in position to receive the ball from the likes of Sarabia, Neymar, and Mbappe. Do you agree that Icardi is arguably one of the best fits you can think of for a center forward for this Inter side, at least certainly in terms of what would be available for a number 9?
Oh, absolutely. And again, you raise a great point, just the way that the pieces fit together. And even at his advanced age, I guess from a soccer perspective, Cavani can be dangerous, but much of what he does is one-dimensional. Going all the way back to his Napoli days and even all the way back with his Uruguayan roots, it is lightning fast on the break and try and catch the defense napping a couple of times to get his good chance on goal. The problem is that kind of gets in the way of Kylian Mbappe's strength, where, and you talked about the fox in a box, the poacher, which Icardi is one of the best. But what I've seen since he's moved to PSG is the ability to get involved in the play, to get involved in the build-up, to actually set up his teammates for goal-scoring chances rather than to try to take everything himself. So he's much more versatile than his reputation was back in Inter, but he's also going to give a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more fluidity to a PSG team that's not always just going to be mash the accelerator.
I think the really encouraging thing for Icardi as well is that it's very, very quiet around Mauro Icardi right now, and that's a really good thing considering all of the noise.
I was going to say, his wife seems to love Paris.
Right. He had been fighting with the ultras of Inter. He had problems apparently in the locker room at Inter, and all of that seems to go quiet. Let's get to some of your comments here, and actually, Phil, we'll get you to react to some of these. Mubarak Aldosari says PSG is in big trouble without Verratti and Angel Di Maria. I get the sense that PSG could be potentially in big trouble no matter if they had all of these players or not, because Atalanta are that entertaining, that dangerous, that attacking aside.
No, what Gianpiero Gasperini has done is, I don't want to say he's lived up to billing, but the reputation that he has among fellow managers is finally on display for all to see. It is not the richest club. It's still probably one of the more modest payrolls in Serie A, and it's a team that tends to build its own. So it has this core, this foundation, and with the insertion, as you mentioned, of the talismanic Papu Gomez, with an Ilicic who's probably finally living up to his billing and his potential, they were able to shock Serie A again, in many ways, more so than they did in what many would have thought was a fluke year the year before. They proved they were not a fluke, challenging for second place the entire year, the ability to even get to this stage of the Champions League. I predicted it after the first four, even the first three, when they were winless, and when they were 0 for 3 after the first four, when they were still winless, that this was an Atalanta team that was still going to end up advancing, just the way the schedule played out. But they had to have that self-belief. They had to take care of business themselves to get the wins and know that the other results would turn in their favor, and they've done so. Gasperini, without a doubt, in my mind, Serie A Manager of the Year, and probably maybe even up for World Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Atalanta are in this position makes him one of Europe's best managers, I feel. In any sense, David Martin chimes in with Atalanta is dangerous, and I expect them to send PSG back to Paris. Strong words. Jaben Kurama, if PSG underestimates Atalanta, they're going to lose that game. It's going to be a good game. Both teams have the best attack. And Richard Murray, Icardi cannot start, right? Icardi cannot start, right? Icardi with only Neymar or Mbappe is not good. I think Icardi will start, and probably if it's not Mbappe, it'll be Paulo Sarabia who fills in alongside Neymar in attack, and that still sounds to me like a very threatening team. I love Sarabia's game. I think when Paris, and Phil, you can chime in on this, when Paris signed both Idrissa Gueye and Sarabia, that suggested to me a very different strategy in terms of how they would fill out the team. It told me they had their superstars. It told me they had their balance, and so what they wanted were not necessarily squad players, but players who can fill a variety of roles, and Sarabia is certainly that. Sarabia played 7 different positions at Sevilla. He was a playmaker on par with Messi for a season when they finished level in La Liga with assists.
Absolutely, but I think this year maybe a little too much time on the bench. There might be a little rust. He showed flashes of getting into scoring positions in these 2 cup matches, but he didn't really have anything at the end. If they can find a way, and again, since the restart, Neymar again drawing the spotlight, but the output has not quite been there. If they can keep Neymar in check, I kind of have a feeling that Atalanta will sneak through. That was my pick. When I saw the way this was going to play out, and I knew it was going to be a winner-take-all, I felt a lot more comfortable in Atalanta. And even after the Saint-Etienne game, where I think PSG, especially in the second half, showed some serious weakness, and against Olympique Lyon, you take a look at some of the performances from the back line. Thiago Silva had to come and rescue time and time again. That might not be possible against an Atalanta squad that likes to ping the ball around. However, PSG does have the victories. Atalanta slowed down just a touch at the end in their race against Inter, and I think that Atalanta probably the more vulnerable of these 2 teams, but you could argue that they're the more dangerous of the 2.
Yeah. I can't see our producer, Mike Fuentes, but I can feel him staring daggers at me because I always go long with this first topic, but you can understand I'm really excited about the Champions League. So before we move on from this match, well, actually, we'll move on from this match, but we'll stay on the tournament because, Phil, I'd like to know your power rankings for the 8 teams that are still left. You had some high praise for Atalanta. Obviously, we all think Paris are one of the more talented teams, if not the most talented team in the competition, especially if Mbappe is anything close to 100%. But why don't you rank these 8 teams for me?
Well, it's really hard to separate some of them, especially considering the fact that this is a season that is so strange in the way it's worked out. I would have predicted Real Madrid. I didn't think Rafa Varane would be the GOAT. I thought he would be one of the heroes, but the fact that Manchester City was able to put them under pressure and get the victory, knocking off the perennial kings, I think you have to put Manchester City top of the heap. Bayern Munich, they got the result against Olympique Marseille in the friendly. They did look somewhat convincing against Chelsea, but that was a Chelsea that was a bit wobbly. But I'm still going to stick with Bayern, although not that comfortably. Again, I'm thinking Barcelona has a chance. Anytime Lionel Messi laces up, he's going to have an opportunity. I was going to drop Atletico a little bit deeper, but with Jan Oblak, the ability to keep games close and an offense that's starting to believe in itself, I wouldn't be surprised if Diego Simeone gets a few specials to sneak their way in. On the other side, you're looking at Leipzig, and this is a team that, if it had Timo Werner, might be able to capitalize on the uncertainty with a lot of these other teams. but I just see it as a bridge too far.
So I actually think you and I had almost the exact same rankings, save 4, 7, and 8. I had Leipzig 7, Lyon 8. You had that flipped over. Otherwise, I'm a little surprised because I think a lot of people are picking Bayern Munich number 1. I agree with you that Manchester City are probably the strongest team in this power ranking. And my thinking for that is I think they have the best balance of talent on the pitch, depth, the season they've had, and what gives them the edge for me is Pep Guardiola, the manager.
And then rearranging the deck chairs a little bit. The reason I put Lyon up 1 and was almost tempted to move them up a couple more notches was the way that they played against PSG and then also against Juve, because Rudy Garcia, again, a manager that puts his team in position not to make mistakes, not to kill itself. And with Memphis Depay, this is a guy that has that ability. It's rare at times, but he does have that ability to do the unexpected. So I still think it's probably a little bit too much, but it's an entertaining final 8.
Some final quick notes here on the Champions League before we move on to Sevilla and the Europa League. Today is PSG's 50th anniversary, so a huge day for the club, and a big question asked of them by Atalanta today whether or not they can go through, because either it'll be the celebratory moment or it won't be. And the other thing is, I think there's something that you can't quantify, but I think has to factor in some way to the way that Atalanta returned from that long layoff, is Bergamo were the region in Italy that was hardest hit by the coronavirus and by the pandemic. And there seemed to be a sense of, I don't know if responsibility is the right word, but a motivation, a sense of cohesion with the city, with the region, of this Atalanta team, that they were playing to give their people some sort of joy. It seemed to galvanize them in a way that I don't know if it's quantifiable, but definitely you see it with your eyes, the way that they returned from that long layoff, looking like one of the best teams, not just in Italy, but in Europe. Phil, I do want to talk a little bit about City.
They did until the final 3 where the Milan duo took points away from them. Let's see if they bounce back against PSG.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the Europa League as well, though, because now the semifinal is set. We know that it will be Sevilla against Manchester United on Sunday, Inter against Shakhtar on Monday of this coming week. But Sevilla, to me, are absolutely incredible, because when I saw that starting lineup come out for the match against Wolves, which they won 1-0, an 88th-minute game winner by Lucas Ocampos, who has been arguably their MVP this season, if not him, certainly Ever Banega. Banega was, in my mind, man of the match in that game. But when I saw the lineup announced, I thought, this is Monchi ball. This is what Monchi does. It's 9 new signings, 9 players that weren't on the team last season that are starting in a knockout match in the last 16 of a European competition. And the scoreline didn't suggest domination, but the flow of the game, the passage of play did to me. Sevilla dominated Wolves.
Oh, they did. In some ways, I almost think it was a bit of a mentality. I love Nuno Espirito Santo. What he's done with Wolves has been phenomenal, but you do kind of sense that they were a little bit intimidated. What was it, about 50 years since they've been to a tournament at this point? And I think they were gasping just a little bit. Rather than impose themselves, they were trying to make sure they didn't get run over. And they almost were able to sneak this into extra time, on to penalties perhaps. But Lucas Ocampos, and the way that he changes games from out wide, and it could be either side, it could be also flashing into the middle, he's not going to get on the podium if there was a Ballon d'Or this year, but he definitely deserves a few votes because he's carrying them. You're right about Ever Banega, but there were stretches this season where Banega disappeared. There were stretches this season where he wasn't quite 100%. When he's on, he's phenomenal. But Lucas Ocampos, every time they blow the whistle, he shows up for battle.
I have a personal suspicion that Lucas Ocampos cannot walk through a metal detector without setting off alarms, because the way that he runs for the entirety of the season, I'm convinced he runs in his sleep. Honestly, he's tireless, he's direct, he's not a flashy player, he looks almost awkward. I used to say he had the mobility of a cigar store wooden Indian, and yet it's done with such power, he has one speed essentially, and it's turned all the way up to 11, and he plays the entire season at that pace, at that tempo, and I think he's been, along with Banega, Sevilla's most influential player this season. Who do you have as the favorite to win this Europa League of the 4 teams remaining?
Well, it's hard not to figure the winner of the Sevilla-Manchester United match is going to be the team that wins it all. Inter, however, the one thing that could be a monkey wrench is Romelu Lukaku's finally living up to billing. This is a guy back when he was 15 was scoring goals for fun. Back when he was, I think it was about 19, 20, I was saying that this is a guy that was going to be the next Cristiano Ronaldo. I think if he would have listened to Zlatan Ibrahimovic and maybe got the lessons that he could have from Ibra, he might be at that level, but he's still very, very dangerous. And this is a player that can, as we saw in the quarterfinals, with just a blink, can make things change. However, Sevilla, we talked about accomplish. You talk about Banega. You talk about the defense. I really like Václav. Not going to make too many mistakes. But Manchester United just seems like a bit of a team of destiny. I don't know how Solskjaer's doing it, but he's doing it. And it's going to be hard to go against United from now on out.
Yep. Let's move along because we do have something to talk about on the transfer train here. And actually, it's transfer trains off the rails when it comes to Real Madrid because they say no new signings. The General Director for Real Madrid, Jose Angel, has confirmed that Madrid plan to make no new signings in the summer transfer window, but the key word there is new. They do have quite a few talented players on loan that they can recall. We know they are recalling because Zidane asked for it. Martin Odegaard, who was one of the storylines in La Liga this season, doing some phenomenal stuff for Real Sociedad. They're also bringing back the goalkeeper Lunin. He'll be in a backup role. Thibaut Courtois, the starter there. Areola is heading back to Paris. But now we're also learning that Dani Ceballos will be recalled to Real Madrid to play in that midfield. You've probably followed Arsenal a lot closer than I have this season. What do you make of Dani Ceballos' excursion to the Premier League, where he played, I believe it was 36 games total in all competitions, 24 of those in the Premiership for the Gunners?
Looked like it was going to be phenomenal when he started out and then kind of dropped down into almost invisible and came back to useful. And in my mind, that's not going to be good enough to crack that midfield. The only way that that changes is if Isco goes, Modric goes, and maybe someone else, even like a Lucas Vazquez or someone departs. Odegaard, they're going to need to find room for him. I don't know if Ceballos would be happy to grab the scraps that might be left over, and he has made noise about getting back to Betis. So I think that Madrid is just going to be a pit stop before he moves on somewhere else. The amazing thing that you talked about, though, was I can't think of the last huge transfer window with Zinedine Zidane in charge of this Real Madrid team. Forget about hiding the checkbook. I think he's hid the fax machine. Florentino is still scrambling to try and find it.
Yeah, Hazard was a big money signing last summer. He didn't necessarily play like it. His season was interrupted. But you're right that their transfer strategy has changed, and you can argue has worked, right? Because when they go out and they sign players like Kubo and send them out on loan, we'll talk about Kubo in a moment because that's a fascinating Villarreal team that's being built. But when you sign young players who you're not paying, over 100 million for, you can loan them out. They star elsewhere, and you bring them back like the Odegaard formula. To a lesser extent, Ceballos. Odriozola is on loan at Bayern Munich. Jesus Vallejo, Reguilón at Sevilla has been doing wonderful work at left back. For Sevilla as well. That their strategy has changed in part by necessity because they couldn't afford to continue to pay the prices they had been paying, although Hazard was an exception for a player who was going to be out of contract this summer anyway, worth keeping in mind. But things are working out for Real Madrid at the moment. Do you think, though, that they can repeat the feat of winning La Liga without any major incorporations other than the players they're bringing back on loan?
It depends who leaves. Again, like I said, Isco down the stretch, especially once play resumed, was a man that Zidane relied upon. Will he stick around? Does Modric leave at now 35 going on 36? Will they finally get someone to help Benzema? That might be the one. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them, because Zidane just finds a way, hold on to a Luka Jovic. And now that he has a year under his belt and something to prove, maybe get a little bit closer to the performance they had at Eintracht Frankfurt. They do need someone, again, up front to just give them a little bit of a breather. I don't know if Mariano is that. In the few moments, he did score one goal that was fine. The rest, he just kind of disappeared. That's the only position. But then again, we've been saying the same thing for 5 years.
Phil, we have, 60 seconds here, so I just want to get your impressions on what Villarreal are doing, because today they confirmed the signing of Dani Parejo, the former Valencia captain, who had a teary-eyed goodbye to his old club. He signed on a free transfer. Francis Coquelin signed for €8 million from Valencia as well, and Kubo brought in on loan from Real Madrid after his breakout season with Mallorca. Based on what they're doing right now, and Unai Emery taking over the Yellow Submarine, does this look to you like it does to me, like a top 4 contender next season? We just have 30 seconds here.
Absolutely. And again, I'm trying to think they might even challenge for top 3, depending upon what happens with Atletico and even Barcelona. But Sevilla, Valencia, they have to take care because Villarreal looks like they're built to win.
Just to close out with some of your comments here so that ours are not the final opinions. John Ice said might as well use the loan army when it comes to Real Madrid. David Martin, Europa final will be Inter against Sevilla. That'll be a joy to watch. I think Inter and Conte bring the trophy back to Milan. And Ryan Moran chimes in with, I can't imagine they would bring Odegaard back without being under the impression that other midfielders would be leaving. Just to answer that real quickly, even if other midfielders don't leave, I have a real good feeling that Odegaard could beat out players like Fede Valverde and Luka Modric for a starting spot in Real Madrid midfield. Big thanks to Phil Schoen for joining us. I'm Andres Cordero. This has been Sports Burst. So long.